Good morning once again, and welcome to Friday. Friday devotion. I'm Mike. I got a line here which I've got to delete, and it was a special good morning to Ken joining us prior to his run. But where is he? So forget that. So without further ado, let's press on with today's passage, which is Mark 15, verses 42 to 47. This all happened on a Friday, the day of preparation, the day before the Sabbath, as evening approached. Joseph of Arimathea took a risk and went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Joseph was an honored member of the High Council, and he was waiting for the kingdom of God to come. Pilate couldn't believe that Jesus was already dead, so he called for the Roman officer and asked if he had died yet. The officer confirmed that Jesus was dead, so Pilate told Joseph he could have the body. Joseph brought a long sheet of linen cloth. Then he took Jesus' body down from the cross, wrapped it in the cloth, and laid it in a tomb that had been carved out of the rock. Then he rolled the stone in front of the entrance. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, saw where Jesus' body was laid. Right, well, this one is more like an Easter passage than a Christmas one. And when I first saw this passage that had been allocated on this Friday, I thought, oh, what am I going to do with this? Because we're coming up to Christmas, and this is very much a sort of Good Friday thing. Anyway, as I looked closer, I saw the person of Joseph of Arimathea, and I found him to be quite interesting as I looked into him. So what I've decided to do today is to focus on this particular Joseph. But first, let me recap excerpts from a talk that was given last Monday by our own Ian Brown, where he said the following: how easy it is for us as Christians to go along with the crowd, the media, and political correctness. He went on to say that we as God's people should be seen to stand out, not wishing to satisfy the crowd and not concerned about public opinion. And this, I think, is exactly the same dilemma that faced Joseph of Arimathea in today's passage. Joseph of Arimathea, it said, took a risk. What risk was this? But before we answer that question, here's another question. And this is, who is Joseph of Arimathea? Well, John chapter 19 from verse 38 tells us a bit more. Afterwards, it says, that is after the crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea, who had been a secret disciple of Jesus because he feared the Jewish leaders, asked Pilate for permission to take down Jesus' body. When Pilate gave permission, Joseph came and took the body away. With him came Nicodemus, the man who had come to Jesus at night. He brought about 75 pounds of perfumed ointment made of myrrh and aloes. Following Jewish burial custom, they wrapped Jesus' body with the spices in long sheets of linen cloth. The place of crucifixion was near a garden where there was a new tomb never used before. Well, we are told here that he was a secret disciple. He was a follower of Jesus, but didn't want it to be known generally. Why was that? And again, the John passage gives us some answers, telling us that he didn't want to upset or get on the wrong side of the Jewish leaders. And the reason for this can be found in our Mark passage today, as he was an honored member of the High Council, so an important position in the political life of the day. It seems clear, therefore, that Joseph was leading something of a double life and trying to keep both plates spinning at the same time. There may have been good reason for this, so we won't judge him here. But there came a point where he was compelled to come out of the shadows and admit his admiration for Jesus and face the consequences. The story of Joseph of Arimathea is told in the other Gospels as well. He is described as a wealthy man from Arimathea in Judea, hence his suffix. A good and righteous man who managed to be both a member of the council, the Sanhedrin, and, as we have seen, a secret supporter of Jesus, which is why he did not join in the council's actions against Jesus. After the death of Jesus, Joseph asked Pilate for permission to take Jesus' body and bury it properly. Permission was granted and the body was taken down. Joseph, helped by Nicodemus, wrapped the body in cloth with the addition of myrrh and aloe, as it says. By asking for Jesus' body, Joseph had in use of modern expression, come out and revealed himself to be a supporter of Jesus. This risked his career and his livelihood amongst those who were against Jesus, quite possibly those who were his colleagues on the council. But as a follower of Jesus, he stood out and was seen to stand out. Now let's consider two more recent versions of this Joseph story, but with similar dilemmas. Firstly, in 1966, Cliff Richard announced at a Billy Graham rally in Earl's Court that he was a follower of Jesus. He sang the Elvis Presley song, It's No Secret Anymore. He took a huge risk at the time with his career, which at the time was on the wane anyway, as new acts such as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, some of us remember them, took the limelight away from Cliff. This announcement, therefore, could have been a complete curtains for his career. Harry Webb, who later became Cliff Richard, started out in 1958, and my earliest recollections were of him, along with his backing group, The Shadows, topping the music charts of the day, well before your time. The first film I ever saw at the cinema was The Young Ones in 1961. At that time, he was riding high. When Summer Holiday was released in 1962, we queued up for half an hour to get in to see it. Such was his popularity. My father said at the time that Cliff and the Shadows were a passing whim and will be forgotten in 10 years' time. The rest, as they say, is history. That would have been 1972, by the way. However, it wasn't always plain sailing for Cliff after that 1966 revelation. He had, after all, in the late 1950s, built his success on being a slightly rebellious character before settling into a more homely image. So Cliff, like Joseph of Arimathea, had put his career firmly on the line. Despite setbacks, Cliff's career has endured, and he has become the UK's most successful solo artist of all time. And as we know, he is still going strong today at the age of 80. So my father's predictions didn't come true after all. I was a fan of Cliff in the early days, but was much more interested in his backing group, The Shadows, who embarked on their own career and released the legendary Apache in 1960. Get that online if you've never heard it. And followed it up by a string of memorable hits. I remember being introduced to The Shadows by my cousin in 1961, who played me various 45s. Hands up if you know what a 45 is. And oh my goodness, I'm surprised. However, Cliff re-emerged into my consciousness in 1980 when I joined Tear Fund, which Cliff supported. Joining Tear Fund in 1980 had been a huge risk for me. The risk was completely alienating my family, who were devastated that I was apparently throwing a good career away to join what they saw as a religious sect. I had up to that point been working for Volkswagen GB, and as a staff member, I got a car as well. So I was quite successful in their eyes. However, God honoured that move to Tear Fund, and a few weeks later, Cliff Richard just happened to appear in my parents' hometown to present a gospel concert for Tear Fund. By the end of the 70s, Cliff had enjoyed something of a renaissance in his career and was riding high again. Suddenly, Tear Fund was all over the local press. And from a place of shame, my parents were suddenly happy to tell everyone that my son worked there, or their son worked there, sorry. I met my wife Pam at Tear Fund, and we were married in 1981. And later that year, we both met Cliff personally after another of his Tear Fund gospel concerts. And then finally in 2009, Pam and I attended Cliff and the Shadows. Cliff for her and the Shadows for me primarily. 50th anniversary concert at the O2. It was the last concert we attended together before Pam became ill as a couple. So Cliff was featured in some way or another in my life growing up. But this was the man who in 1966 took a huge risk with his career by announcing that he was a follower of Jesus. And whether you like Cliff or not, he has, in my opinion, been a great ambassador for our Christian faith. He's enjoyed a long and prosperous career, as we've seen, but the false allegations made against him in 2014 have made his life very difficult. So I think he deserves our prayers. He is a good Christian man, and as I mentioned, he turned 80 last month, and he's still going strong, a bit like our own Ian Brown, who is a month older than Cliff. And as we have seen, he's still performing on that other stage, which happens to be our church in these devotional times. Anyway, to move quickly on, let's consider our second example. And here we have a very different proposition. Last Sunday, the BBC screened a drama in its Small Acts series of films made by director Steve McQueen and featuring stories from Britain's black community. Last Sunday's episode was a true story focusing on the career of Leroy Logan. Here are the notes preceding the film in a TV guide. Based on real events, the latest Small Act film, Red, White and Blue, begins in 1983 when two policemen viciously beat Leroy Logan's dad, Kenneth, simply for parking his lorry in the wrong place. But Leroy's friends and family are shocked when he reacts by joining the police force himself in a bid to help reform the police. Leroy has a good job as a forensic scientist, but he wants to serve his community in a more important way. This was the time when race relations were complicated and he was entering an institution that isn't used to his culture. Leroy came through his police training with flying colours and was chosen as the face of the new advertising campaign encouraging black people to join the police. Yet he faced hostility from all corners. His new colleagues tried to wear him down, and lots of black people think he's a traitor. His father also struggles to accept his choice, and that relationship is at the centre of the story. What this article doesn't mention is Leroy's Christian faith and how he was influenced in his decision and how that influenced his decision making. His book entitled Closing Ranks was recently published by SPCK. This talks a lot more about his Christian faith and how it sustained him. In the end, God gives and God takes away. The question is this: should I remain silent for the sake of my career, like Cliff could have done, or should I take the risk and speak out? Or should I be like Leroy Logan and try and change things from within? In saying this, I realize that in some situations it is not necessarily wise to speak out, as in certain countries or situations. Ecclesiastes says there is a time and a place for everything. So yes, be wise and follow God's direction, speaking out when it is right. Cliff waited a few years before speaking out, but God's prompting him, he did speak out, as we have seen. The same applies to Joseph of Arimathea, as we have seen today in Mark's passage. Joseph was now in Leroy's position, where he was a member of the council, so he could try and make changes from within. Whether he did or not, as far as I know, isn't recorded as such. So what can we take away from this? We should be open and honest to God if God is telling us to speak out. Number two, we should not be timid and worry about the consequences if God is telling us to speak out. Leave the consequences to him. Number three, you may never know what effect your speaking out has on a person. And number four, join in with society, make a difference from within, be in the world, but not of it. Adrian Holloway, the son-in-law of Ian and Marion Brown, and a former member of the church here, once described a person's journey to faith as a number of imaginary steps, where number one is total unbelief and number 10 is becoming a Christian. He said, your words and openness may just move an individual from, say, position 5 to position 6 on that journey. At position 6, you may not see much fruit for your efforts, but your timely words may just have moved them a few steps closer to salvation. You may never know, or you just might. I was once involved in one of those awful things where you stand in a shopping precinct and talk to people about Jesus. In journalism, it's called doorstepping or vox popping. I spoke to a lady who was very hostile and told me I was out of order and stormed off. 3 years later, I happened to meet her again. She told me she was attending the local church and thanked me for what I'd said that day. What I said at the time didn't seem to make much difference. In fact, it seemed to make things worse. But it did, it seems, start her on a journey which she continued. I was fortunate to hear this, but you may not hear the outcome of something you've said. Clearly, the 1 to 10 scale is a helpful guide to encourage us in our speaking out. Some people move a number of steps at once, or may go straight to number 10. Maybe the same concept could be applied to changing our society and institutions. It doesn't happen overnight. God rewards risk takers and those who step out for him. Joseph of Arimathea was just such a person. He nailed his colours to the mast. He had done things in secret until that point and felt compelled to speak and reveal his true allegiances. Just like Cliff Richard, he was prepared to set aside his career and make his love for Jesus known. And Leroy Logan, who did things the other way round and sacrificed his own family and community to join, as it were, the enemy camp and to try and change things from within, to bring the love of God where it was needed. As we know, Cliff Richard still has his career and he's about to embark on another tour at the age of 80. Leroy Logan, MBE, has hugely influenced policing in this country. He went on to have a successful career in the police and continues to assist in his retirement at the age of 63. His late father accompanied him to the palace to receive his MBE and commented to his son that he made the right decision after all, which is something my father said to me later on about my decision to join Tier Fund. So finally, let's recap a couple more points that have been made in these devotionals this week. Again on Monday, Ian Brown said, we can be drawn along to and accept the standards of the day, or we can step out and seek to make changes. Cliff and Leroy did that. It wasn't always easy, but they did, and still do, make changes in their respective fields of influence. And to remind you of Ian's challenge from last Monday, what will you do with Jesus? Neutral, you cannot be. And let's also remind ourselves of Julian's words to us on Wednesday when he said, God asks us to do things that are not always easy. The easy way out is often not to do the task. Jesus kept going with his mission, and so can we. Maybe, just maybe, God's given word or action, a God-given word or action by you in the right place at the right time will change someone's life in our community. So don't be discouraged if you don't see immediate results. Remember, every drop of water dripping in a bucket will eventually fill the bucket up. A frightening prospect speaking out? Well, yes. But as I said last Friday, we do have the power of God's Holy Spirit at our disposal. Joseph of Arimathea, Cliff Richard, and Leroy Logan are all examples of what can be achieved by stepping out and getting off the fence. We should do likewise. And once again, thank you very much for your kind attention, and we'll pass to prayer.